Good morning from the second age of reason. Today, I was just thinking over how some people are called climate change people or climate denier people. And climate is, a lot of it is statistics, and that is to do with temperature. It has to do with atmospheric wind, humidity, composition, precipitation, and all that, and it's statistics. And that is only one aspect of the climate we live in. And I can't help but think that there are a lot of other ways that climate is changing that isn't even considered at all in the discussion. And so I'm going to just bring some of these other climate changing parameters before you to consider and see how they fit into the grand scheme of things in terms of human life on Earth today. The wind has started to pick up all of a sudden too. How interesting. We have climate, which is the wind around us out and being outdoors. And the thing about humans is we have adaptation ability, which makes it comfortable for us in different situations. So we have created an indoor climate in buildings with processed atmosphere in the buildings, which is it the same composition as outdoor atmosphere? Is it the same temperature and humidity? Or is it trying to imitate a certain climate of a certain part of the planet? And what does that do for the human survival matrix? So that's one aspect, is that humans have become much more adapted to indoor climates. And so the outdoor climates, which I think has more variation than indoor climates, may produce a sort of a conflict in our survival. Another aspect of a changing climate of sorts, I call it your survival index, your survival matrix. There are certain things that humans have had to survive over, whether it's thousands of years or millions of years or whatever. You have your senses. Is it 5 senses? Is it more senses? Or was it less senses? Well, let's just look at a few of these, for instance. One sense is your sense of smell, and has the smell of things, which is a survival sense. Smelling if there's a fire, smelling if there's like the ozone from lightning nearby, smelling if there's maybe a volcano or something else, a poison. And when humans were out in the regular wild, they were sensitive to those smells, and they could say, something's on the wind. And now that you've been having your unified indoor atmosphere, your sense of smell is maybe not quite as sharp, or it's focused on different priorities. Your sense of smell has the smell of everything changed in the past 100 years or more, probably. Your sense of taste, the foods we eat. Well, we have a mixture. Some people grow their own foods. Some people buy foods from farmers markets, and these are the raw foods, which are probably more closer to nature than the ones you buy in a can or frozen. Your sense of taste is a survival skill, to know if something is good food or bad food, nutritious food or junk food. Those are survival skills. And now that they've been making genetically modified food to make the taste more uniform, more boring, less variation, taking out the bitter and adding more sweet, what does that do to your survival matrix? The climate of your food flavors has been changing in the past 100 years. The nutrition indexes of the food because there's a lot less genetic variation in the food over the years. And with the genetically engineered food, you have new genetic mixes coming into the food. You could say, well, when you go to foreign festivals and things and you eat foreign foods, it's just the same thing. You're eating things that you're not accustomed to. But I starting to think that when you have man-made genomes, you may be adding a factor into there that hasn't been there in the past thousands of years. Something to consider. Another invisible survival thing is the internet. In the past, it was on a wire, and you would have to plug it in, you'd have to navigate the whole thing. You had it on the wire. Well, now it's Wi-Fi. So the internet is everywhere. It permeates. It goes through you. It's essentially related to microwaves, which we use to cook with. So in a sense, with Wi-Fi and internet, we are being slowly cooked. And is that radiation? It's a form of radiation. Is it altering our genome? Maybe not in a couple of years, maybe not even in a generation or 2 or 5, but over time. How will the cumulative effect on the human genome add up of all this added and different radiation to which we haven't been accustomed to? Another sense we have is a sense of hearing. Hearing is a survival skill. You can hear the wind. You can hear the leaves on the trees rustling. You can hear the birds chirping. You can hear vehicles going by. Right now, when you listen, I am close to a highway and you can hear the vehicles going by. To me, hearing the vehicles go by on a highway is like when you're on a vacation. And so I am always thinking, oh, I'm like at the Hilton off the main interstate and it's a vacation. But that sound was not present 100, 200 years ago. And humans haven't heard that sound in thousands of years. Now we are hearing it all the time. It's like a white noise masking survival sounds. The sounds of predators that may be stalking you. The sounds that you might be stalking your prey. Sounds that are necessary to survive. We do not have our senses focused on the survival sounds like we used to. That is a climate change of sorts, a climate change we've been overlooking. Another climate change is visual. I found this out when I was in photography school, and we took movies of things, and there's this thing we have in the past 100 or 200 years called electricity, and we have it on alternating current. So the electricity is on a waveform. In America, it's 60 cycles per second. In Europe, it's 50 cycles per second. And that's how much electricity varies. Well, if you have a light, whether it's incandescent or fluorescent, that light is running off that alternating current. And basically, you don't see it because your eyes are only tuned to things within, 10 or 20 cycles per second. But those lights that you see in the buildings, on the highways or whatever, are all flickering in unison. They turn on, they turn off. They turn on, they turn off. And yet, that is flooding into your brain. You don't know it, you don't perceive it, but it is real. I have photographed it with a high-speed movie, and you can see And now to continue, after I had my battery failure, I had to recharge them and come back to this. I was talking about how electricity is 60 cycles, or maybe 50 cycles if you're in Europe. And what happens is because of that, your incandescent lights and your fluorescent lights and maybe your other LED lights and whatever have this 60 cycle power running through them, meaning the light turns on and off and on and off 60 times a second or 30 times a second, something like that. So your eyes are constantly bombarded by the alternating lights on and off all the time you're in the lights. So question is, have we adapted to that? Is that normal? Or is there something accruing in our consciousness because of that constant flickering going on, even though we don't normally perceive it? So in wrapping it up, I'm just trying to point out, climate change is just not global warming. It's just not carbon dioxide only. There could be other things. I mean, you know, all the food additives and all the chemicals in our environment, or lack of chemicals in the environment. So, think about that. And you can rate, like it below, or comment, leave your comments if you maybe know of some other climate change things, chemically, energy-wise, psychologically, socially. These climate things, many of them affect the survivability of the species, the viability of the species. And as some people have pointed out, and maybe you disagree, we are in another great extinction phase, probably because certain factors have changed in the environment. So, let's open up the discussion and let's talk about this. And if we want to fix it, if it needs fixing, how are we going to approach it? So, I'll leave it at that at this point. So until later, we'll be seeing you. Bye-bye.